Hey, thanks for checking out this how-to video on concrete countertops. This is one of a series build that we're doing on our Barndominium, and we have concrete countertops in my wife's studio, and we actually had a representative from Rapid Set come down from San Antonio and show us how to do this particular style of countertop. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to record that then, and that was about a year ago. And now that I had a chance to do it again, I figured we would record it, show you guys what we did, and pass on the information that we learned from them. And these are a awesome alternative to like granite or quartz. Of course, they're not on that same level as far as elegance, but in themselves, they're beautiful. They're irregular. When you do it, you're going to have a one-of-a-kind piece. So if it's something that you're interested in doing, hopefully this video will give you the knowledge that you need. Also, we'll include a list of all the materials we use. We got everything at Home Depot. I'm not real sure if Lowe's carries the exact brand of concrete, but basically we did this 12-foot countertop from everything at Home Depot in about 3 hours start to finish. That includes hanging it on the wall. So hopefully you like what you see. Make sure to like, subscribe, check out our other videos on this build series that we're doing, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks a lot. Real quick, before we get into the build process, just wanted to show you two completed countertops that we did last year in my wife's studio. One being a vanity top with an undermount sink, and the other is her kitchen sink. Both are holding up nicely and are protected by a water-based sealant called TK6 Nano Coat, and this is an extra low gloss application which gives it more of a natural stone finish. And if you're looking for something that looks more wet, you can go with their gloss option as well. But these countertops are holding up nicely and they look great. Here's the product that we're using for these concrete countertops. It is called Cementol by Rapid Set. It is a multi-purpose repair material and non-shrink grout. Read that. It says sets in 15 minutes, structural strength in 1 hour. So after we pour, I think we're going to wait approximately an hour and a half before we start to break the mold. We're using 3/4 inch melamine for our forms, and we have ripped our base so far. Out of this, which is going to be this piece here, and then right now he's working on ripping the sidewalls for it, which this is going to be what, 2 inches height, 2 1/4 thickness. So we're going to rip our sidewalls down right here. Here we're putting on the sidewalls, and we're overlapping these seams here. Since this whole thing is going to be 12 foot in length, of course we only could get 8 foot. This is a melamine, so we're going to overlap this seam with the front seam, and then the back seam will be done the opposite way and overlap on this side here when we're done. So for this to be, it's going to be 2 1/4 in depth, so we cut these at what, 2 and
at 3.
These are at 3, and then this is 3/4 inch thickness, leaving us 2 1/4 total depth for the thickness of our concrete. With the countertop being 12 foot long, it's impossible for us to build this kind of slab without having a seam. So the two choices we have is to build 2 different slabs and then butt them together after the fact and have a seam that we fill with either epoxy or silicone. In this case, what we're doing is butting 2 pieces of melamine together, and then this creates what's called just a cosmetic seam. This keeps us from having to do 2 different molds and allows us to do 1 solid slab. Therefore, we can run rebar from one end to the other, this making the entire slab stronger. And so what we did here to make this seam as subtle as possible and as smooth after the fact is run some screws from the underside of this little mounting surface that we have here, this plywood. Run it on both sides, and then you can loosen them or tighten them according to each side to get them as flush and level as possible. You want to be able to rub your hand across there and not feel much of any difference between the 2 slabs. So It'll be impossible to have zero seam, I think, in this case, but we did pretty good as far as getting that nice and tight, and you'll be able to see that finished product. So we're going to try something on this experiment. We're going to experiment on this seam here with some spackling. We're going to, instead of putting tape, or we may even do tape still, but for sure we're going to use a spackling, and then we're just going to wet sand it lightly, because if you do any sanding on your melamine surface, it will actually change the texture of your concrete. So if you did like a circle here or a line here, it would show up on your the texture on the finished product of your countertop. Anyways, this is a pretty good idea. I think this is going to work good. And then the rest of these seams are going to be done with caulking. We're going to use a fast drying caulk. I think it's rain ready in 30 minutes is what we're using. So here we're just caulking all the seams, and we're using black because it allows you to see a lot better against this white melamine. That way you can find your imperfections. Anyways, that's it. Just going to try to do the whole box and get all these seams done. Look at that beautiful bead. Perfection. I messed it up. I had to say something. Perfection though. Here's the mounting brackets that we've kind of chosen to use on this particular countertop, and we've got 5 of them. Got them all squared up and level, and they're 12 inches deep here from back to front. And this is going to be a 13-inch countertop, so it'll have a 1-inch overhang. Should be plenty strong. Here's the finished form ready for concrete. And we'll just take the rebar out. This is 3/8 rebar. Pour the concrete in and then set the rebar back in place. How many hours do you think we're in so far? So we're on hour number 2. We've got the form built, and I was gone for half the time. He was doing this by himself. The brackets hung, the rebar ready. So now we're just gonna take a lunch break and pour the concrete. So we're about to start the mixing process right now, and once we get started, it's super fast. You don't want to have like really any downtime between each bag of mortar mix that we're gonna mix in here. So I think it's like, what'd you say, 20?
About 20 quarts, or 20 cups.
20, it's gonna be 20 cups of water per bag. And then we're going to be adding in an agent that slows down the, I guess it's the curing process, because if you don't put that stuff in there, this stuff dries crazy fast. Let's see if I can find a little bag of it. It is called Set Control. So 1 bag of this, and we're going to dissolve it in the required amount of water first, get it nice and mixed up, and then we'll pour the bag of concrete mix into here, dump it into the mold, and then the second that bucket is empty, we're going to start on the next one. So this will be quick, bang, bang. So first things first, he's going to put that Set Control .
Give it a good mix.
Should be helping right now. So one's getting mixed. This one's already got the right amount of water in it. And then this is our water bucket so that we can go super fast. About how long you mix it for? Just a couple minutes?
Yeah, about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes.
Okay. very watery.
Where is that set? Right down here.
It's on the front, on the other side of the fence. Unless you want to do this, and I'll do that. At this point in the build process, we poured the first bag of mortar mix into the mold, and my brother here is just using a couple of hammers to pound on the outer walls and the underside to make sure that the concrete is getting everywhere inside the mold, especially that bottom surface, which will in turn be the finished countertop when the mold is removed and the concrete is flipped over. This entire video and process of this build is quite lengthy. I understand that. This part can be a little bit redundant. It may be a little boring, so I did my best to kind of fast forward. In some parts, the video is up to like I think 1.5 speed, and I've kind of skipped a few little things here and there. But I wanted to really try and leave as much footage and detail as possible. If you're doing this for the first time, I think seeing the little things like how he used the trowel to push the mud, the screeding process, setting the rebar in, things like that, I think go a long way. Seeing those things, we could have easily done like time lapse or stop motion, and you're really just not going to get that same amount of information and detail that you would. So if you don't want to watch the whole video, feel free just to fast forward. I think this is about, I'm thinking 30 minutes it took us to mix all these and dump everything in and get it to that final point. So it's, sped up quite a bit, but I think seeing everything in full detail is going to give you the most confidence to feel like you really know what you're doing. That's how I feel personally when I watch videos on something I don't know much about. If you have any questions, like if there's just something you don't quite understand, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll do my best to help. One thing to keep in mind is you are kind of working against the clock. You want to be as fast as you can, but you also want to be thorough and not miss anything. This part here, he just notched a 1x4, I believe, that we had left over to use it as a screed. And the reason that he's doing this, I know next he's about to put the rebar in, but the other purpose is that as you start to stack these bags of concrete on top of one another, they dry in their own time, and sometimes you get a layering effect. So you see the different layers of each bag of concrete that was poured on top of the other. And by doing this between the bags, it helps to create kind of a straight line if there is any layering effect there. I don't believe we had much of any at all, actually. The other reason he's doing it at this point is for the rebar. He wants to make sure that it's going in evenly across the countertop and that he won't push it in too far in one area and it actually touches the surface or protrudes or anything like that. So I believe we're just about halfway through all the concrete that we are going to use on this build, and this is the perfect time to add in the rebar, which is 3/8, and he just kind of wiggles it down just beneath the surface before pouring the next mixture of concrete over the top of it. And one thing you will notice too, as you pour each layer of concrete over the next, the previous layer kind of seems to dry out the next layer a little quicker. I think the very first layer we poured seemed like it was the most watery because there's nowhere for that moisture to go. That the mold was not going to suck the moisture out of the concrete. But just take your time. It's not crazy critical. The time is not like, it's not instant. And here he's working the concrete towards himself. That's going to be the front edge of the finished product. And he's just making sure to push that concrete all the way in towards the front so that if there is any kind of layering effect, it will be less noticeable. I believe we only have one more bag after this. It might be two.
Yeah, but I've been getting lower. You want me to get the sander? Nah, it's already way set up enough.
This here is the final kind of screeding process. Just using a 1x4 to screed. The concrete, he's using the trowel to kind of push the concrete where he wants it and then just screeding across the top. And remember, this is going to be the bottom, so it doesn't have to be perfect. And technically, once you screed this, you really could stop at that point. You don't have to work the concrete any further. It will be the bottom. You're not really going to see it, but my brother likes to work the concrete quite a bit to get it to a finished look. He's a professional, so that's kind of his realm of things that he likes to do. But if you don't feel comfortable with working the trowel over and over after you screed the concrete pretty flat, you don't need to, so don't worry about that.
Did you put the extended set in this one? Get harder one. It's a little bit on the thicker side. That's what I was saying. Why are you so hard on it?
I believe this right here is the final screed, so he's worked it one way, now he's going to work it back, and at that point, like I was saying, you could be done. You could walk away, let it sit for an hour or so, whatever, and then break your molds off and you're finished. But if you continue to watch, you'll see that he does work the trowel, it gets it nice and smooth. He does a little bit of indentions on the edges to help give it more of a rounded look. How strong do you think it's pretty for this record is thick, or 1.5 inches?
I don't know. Well, 1.5 inches would be fine. I don't know about an inch. I don't know if I would trust it for a floating countertop at an inch.
It's pretty good. But keep in mind that this is the bottom of the slab. And he's got a little bit of a bevel. This is gonna be the front, and this will be the back, so we don't really care a whole lot about the back being perfect, but it's putting a little beveled edge with that trowel. So when it's hanging, it'll look nice and smooth and rounded over. It'll still have a sharp corner, but it won't be like, hopefully it won't be jagged when we bust these forms off. So this produces a ton of heat. Like, you can feel the heat coming off the slab. So the water helps to kind of slow the drying process down, or the curing process, I guess you say. This has been sitting up about, what, 20 minutes maybe since the first pour. I'm just going to take off this one cap. Beautiful. Beautimus. Look at that. Alright, moment of truth here for this front rail coming off.
So far, so good.
Beautiful. This is going to be the front outer edge. That's straight out of the mold. And that one just came right off. Yeah, a couple little.
It's on the back side.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Overall, excellent. Here's the back side. You can see there are some pits here. Now here's where the seam was. Just break that off. Get that smooth. Kind of cleaning up that hard edge there. So it's been about what, 45 to 55, somewhere around 45, 55 minutes since we poured the last bag in. This thing's still producing a ton of heat. We'll just keep getting it wet like this until it cools down. To keep the slab in place on these brackets, we're just using 3 globs of silicone on each one. That's all it'll take to hold it in place.
Let's see. I'm gonna push it my way. Swivel it. And you need to overhang your side. Now come to the inside of it. Now go around. Okay. There you go. And then we work on the opposite sides of each other. Keep it straight up as much as you can. Ready? You're leaning toward you before you go. Gotta keep it. Man, this thing's hot.
Yeah, hot and heavy.
And you set it on your knees. Yep.
You good? Sure?
Now set it just on your leg. Go all the way to the wall.
Okay.
Alright. Just gotta trim that.
Get out of there.
Oh, look, it's got flow.
Yeah. Push back towards me. There we go.
Just have to split that difference.
Got a bow in the wall. Who framed this wall? Yeah.
See how much better the silicone just like, yeah, it comes right off.
Right.
Okay, that's it. Three and a half hours worth of work. We have a finished concrete countertop.